Alright, YouTube. About a year and a half ago, I made a video where I just talked about all of my PlayStation 3 games. Now, of course, since then I've gotten a lot of new games, so I decided to make a new video for three main reasons. First of all, on my old video, I began to get a lot of comments that were like, "Dude, how do you not have Uncharted 2?" To which I responded, "Dude, look at when the video was made. Uncharted 2 wasn't even out then." So that began to get really annoying. So I figured I'd just make a new video as sort of an update. Because I hated getting comments like that. I got about 10 comments asking me why I didn't have a game that wasn't out when I made the video. Number two reason, I'll be dead honest with you. That video got me a ton of subscribers and has the most views of any video I've made. That's cool. And I'd like more views. So, honestly, that's another reason. It's a popular video. I got to talk to a lot of people about a lot of good games. And that leads into the third reason. Like, a lot of my subscribers will ask me, like, do you have whatever game? And sometimes we get into, like, really good discussions about the game. We talk about, like, whether it's a good game, whether it's bad, what we liked, what we didn't like. And I really like that type of interaction on YouTube. It's a cool thing. So that's another reason why I'm making this video. Because I like replying to comments, and I like it when my subscribers know what type of games I have, so we can talk about them some. And it's basically just cool to be able to talk to people about games that we like. Just like the last video, I'm going to try to do it almost exactly the same way. First I'm going to do multi-platform games, and then I'm going to do exclusive games for PS3. Alright, so, oh yeah, and I'm going to say whether I think you should buy the game, maybe rent it, or whether you should just avoid the game because it's bad. Alright, the first one up is the expansions to Grand Theft Auto 4. This is on one disc. It's also for download. The expansion packs are called The Lost and the Damned and The Ballad of Gay Tony. They're both actually really good. Like the titles don't sound that interesting, you know? Like The Ballad of Gay Tony and The Lost and the Damned. Whatever. But they're actually really cool because they're a lot different than the original game. Like, Lost and the Damned, you're basically in a motorcycle gang, which is kind of cool because Grand Theft Auto's never really had that before. And the gameplay's all good. The missions are a lot like GTA 4, so if you didn't like GTA 4, you probably wouldn't like the expansions either. But the Ballad of Gay Tony, I think, is the best one because you basically get, like, a tank you can drive around, and you can get it whenever you want. And like a helicopter that actually shoots missiles. So it's a really cool game. It adds enough to the game to be worth getting. In fact, you can get it by itself, too. They each have their own campaign, they each have their own online, they each have their own trophies or achievements. Yeah, it's definitely a buy. Now this might actually be the best Batman game ever made. I hesitated for a second because I was thinking maybe the best superhero game ever made. And you could probably say it is. But it's definitely one of the best Batman games ever made. Batman Arkham Asylum. It's a really cool game. Like, if you like games that are a little bit about mystery, or maybe if you like games that are just like you beat up a bunch of guys, or, or if you like Batman, this is a great game to get if you like any of those things. It's more in the vein of the newer Batman movies, but like it also has a ton of references to the comics. Like, I was really impressed. If you basically go through the entire game and you do some of the optional things, you can get like all these nice little things that are like about the comics. They connect the game to the comics. You have a lot of characters. You got Poison Ivy, Joker, of course. You have like a ton of villains. It takes place on basically a jail island where, like, all of the super criminals are locked up. And of course, the Joker sets them free. So, in all this chaos, Batman has to, like, figure out all these mysteries and solve all these problems. And it's a really fun game, and the plot's really cool, too. And the combat is actually pretty challenging when you get to the end. It's a definite buy if you like superheroes or Batman or anything like that. It also has a lot of challenge rooms, which are cool and fun to play through. The free Joker challenge rooms for PS3 are not nearly as good, but they're okay and they're free, so who's complaining? definitely a buy for that one. These next two games go hand in hand. Assassin's Creed 2 and Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. You know, they're both buys, really. They both continue a really good series. They both have cliffhanger endings, you know. It gets really annoying after the third cliffhanger ending. And I'm beginning to get a little worried about the plot of Assassin's Creed. It's getting really complex, and they're not really solving anything. But with that said, the gameplay is really fun in both of them. I would say probably buy both, because they both have a very different story. It's like Assassin's Creed 2, you're looking at a new character, Ezio. The game's been out for a while, it's probably pretty cheap. It's worth looking into. The gameplay's a bit changed, you got more weapons now. Yeah. And in Brotherhood, you actually get other assassins to help you. Again, the plot continues Ezio's story this time. And this actually is the first one to have an online. And the online's really cool to play through. So these are both good games in the same series. They're different enough to be worth buying them both. Now we also have another series here. Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas. They both have very different stories. You know, Fallout 3 is on the East Coast in DC, which is really cool for me because I live near DC, so I like recognize all sorts of stuff from the game. And New Vegas takes place not on the West Coast, but pretty close. It takes place in the Mojave, which is a desert. It's basically in Nevada and parts of California. And they're both really good. Like, if you've played Fallout, if you like role-playing games, you'll love these. They're both about, I'd say, 40 to 60 hours for a standard playthrough, but they have tons of other stuff you could do, too. Like, you could easily blow about 200 hours on either one of these. Even though they're in the same series, you don't need to have both of them to understand the story. In fact, they're almost completely unrelated. You play as a different character, different situation, different side of the country. They both take place around the same time, though. So they're both really fun games. They're like a bazillion weapons, a lot of cool quests, a lot of cool stories. They're really long, but they're really fun. The plot's really good, and they both have like a karma meter, and they both have a lot of different endings. They're both really cool games that are worth checking out. Now here's one that's old, but it took me a while to get this one. It's good old Bioshock. I said in my last video of this, my original PlayStation 3 games video, I'm not a huge fan of first-person shooters, but this one's actually pretty cool. Like, I realized that the main reason I don't like a lot of first-person shooters is because they don't have a good plot. But Bioshock has a really deep and a really interesting plot. It's not quite like what you've heard before. It's very different. It's a unique plot. Just like Fallout, it has kind of a karma type of thing going on, and there are multiple endings. And the story deals with a whole lot of kind of philosophical things even, but like, the gameplay is good enough and fast-paced enough so that even if you're not really in it for the story, you'll still have a lot of fun. And there's all sorts of hacking, there's a fair amount of tactics involved, and it's overall a pretty fun game. It's kind of old, though. So, for this one, I would say, if you just want to play it because you're interested in the new Bioshock game coming out soon, then probably just rent it, so you get the plot, because you can, you know, play through the basic story pretty quickly. But if you're actually interested in the game and you want to really learn, like, the different endings, and you think you might actually be into it, then you should definitely buy it. Whether you rent or buy is completely based on why you're playing it. If you just want to get the story, just rent it real quick so you can get into the next Bioshock game, so you get the whole story. But if you're buying it just because you want a game to play, buy it. Alright. This one's a bit of a tough call for me. The Call of Juarez. Now this is... It's weird. It's from Ubisoft. The game starts off pretty weakly, I think. You start off in the end of the American Civil War. And the first act of the game is in 5 acts. Act 1, I pretty much hated. It was in the Civil War, but it wasn't really interesting. It was very linear. It was kind of dry. It wasn't horrible, but the gameplay wasn't that great. The graphics were just bleh. Kind of dark and not really interesting, but not very detailed either. But then it got a lot better after that. You move into the Wild West, and you basically have a whole plot of like revenge, and there are a lot of cool side missions you can play. And also, probably the coolest thing about this game, even though it doesn't really work all the time, is the one-on-one gun duels you have. You have like an old Western style game, which is pretty unique in itself. So if you like the Wild West, you should definitely check it out. But then you have like one-on-one pistol duels. And the way those work is you basically, it's like a Wild West showdown. Like you go into the middle of the town and draw as quick as you can, and whoever shoots first wins. So it's unique in that way. That system doesn't always work though, because as you can imagine, the way it gets harder is just the computer begins to react more and more quickly, and in the final battle you basically just have to be lucky, which I hate. But overall the game has enough cool moments, and you can play as 2 different characters for almost every mission in the game. So it has a decent amount of replay value. I would say this is like the definition of a rental game. It's really not a game that you're gonna love, but it could be a lot of fun, especially because it's a bit different, because it's a Wild Western game. I mean, how many Wild Western games come out? Besides Red Dead Redemption. So, this is nothing compared to Red Dead Redemption, but if you are tired of that and you want something else, check this out. It's decent after you get past Act 1, and most people will have fun with it. So rental for that one. Last one, Dantes Inferno. Now this is based off of a really old book from the 1300s written by an Italian guy named Dante. We had to read it for English, and if you've actually read the book, it actually adds something to the game. Like, you actually will appreciate some of the stuff in the game a bit more. But even if you haven't, it's a really fun game, especially because there are 2 different paths you can take. There's basically a light path and an evil path. So that adds a lot to the replay value. The gameplay is kind of ripped off of God of War, to the extent that when the controls are different than God of War, it's actually annoying, because you end up doing something that you don't want to do because you think you're playing God of War for a split second. But the plot's different enough to make up for that. So if you like God of War's combat, this is very similar. It's different enough, but it's similar in a lot of regards. It's got that puzzle solving, then a bunch of action, then another puzzle, then a bunch of action. It's got that sort of a formula just like God of War. But then it changes it up by being like a Christian version of that. Like, it's based on Dante's Inferno, like I already said, which is basically mythology fairly closely based on Christian belief. Just like God of War is based on Greek mythology. So it's cool. It's definitely a buy, you know? I know I'm giving a lot of these games buys, but they are really good. And Dante's Inferno is actually a really cool game. It might not sound like the coolest idea, but it really is. I mean, the final battle is against Satan. That's a pretty cool final boss. Alright, that's all for the multi-plat games. Now we have exclusives. Speaking of God of War, yeah, God of War 3. I mean, there's not too much to say about this one. It kind of speaks for itself. The God of War franchise is one of Sony's best and biggest, and for a lot of reasons. It's really gory, but it's really fun. It's really violent, but it's really fun. And it's about Greek mythology, but it's really fun. So as you can tell, it's just really fun. The combat's really good. It can be a little repetitive, especially if you've played the other 2 games. But the plot's a little different this time, because instead of trying to take down one god, or the Fury, or... Sorry, not the Furies, the Fates. You're taking down everybody, which is pretty cool. And when I say everyone, I mean the world. You're trying to take down the world. And it has a really cool ending, too. So the plot's really good. It wraps up the plot really well. Obviously, it's a buy. You know, if you've played the other 2 games, you understand how good they are. Even if you haven't, you know, you should probably go out and buy the other 2 before you get this one, so you understand the plot. But even if you don't, it's a pretty easy plot to understand in its basic level. It's all about revenge. So gameplay's good, graphics are amazing. Um, the ingenuity it has a couple new gameplay elements, but like the way it sets itself apart from other games is just by the amount of gore and violence. Like if you think Grand Theft Auto was violent, this blows Grand Theft Auto away. All right. So it's definitely not a game for little kids, but on the other hand, it's a really fun game. Here's my second favorite game on the PS3. Uncharted 2. Now, Uncharted 2 is an amazing sequel to an amazing game. The weird thing about video games is you occasionally get sequels that are actually better than the original, and this is one of those cases. The original was an amazing game, but this blows it away. The graphics are... I'm not quite sure if they're the best graphics on the PS3, but they're pretty close. When the game came out, it would probably have the best graphics of any game on the PS3. The gameplay is absolutely amazing. It's so fun. The story is kind of fast-paced. It's like a summer action movie, but in all the right ways. It's like an amazing summer action movie with a really good plot, with really cool characters. I mean, the whole plot kind of is similar to the first game, in that you're basically going after something that's not supposed to be real. In this case, though, you're going after the Chintamani Stone rather than El Dorado. You get ambushed. Things go horribly wrong. It has a twist similar to the first game, but I like the twist in this game a bit better. The first game, this is a spoiler here, the first game when you encounter like the zombie people, it's like, that was kind of stupid. I don't know. Now in this game, even though it's such a similar twist, I like it more for some reason. I can't really explain why. The trophies, like the first game, are great. You can easily get a platinum trophy, but still you have a couple that are challenging. A lot of different guns. Online is not perfect, but it's really, really, really good. Like I said, it's my second favorite game, PS3. Definitely a buy. And like I said, I know I'm giving these games a ton of buys, but they really deserve it. And that trend's not going to end anytime soon with Heavy Rain. Heavy Rain is another one of those games that's just really, really, really good, but it just didn't sell nearly as much as it should. I don't know what the sales for Heavy Rain are. They weren't like abysmal, but this is another game that should have sold like 4 or 5 million. You know, it's a really deep game, has a really good plot. It's definitely a mystery game. Like, if you like mysteries, you will love this. If you like games with a deep plot, you'll love this. It has a lot of detail. It's not exactly fast-paced, which I think is why it didn't sell too well. It's another contender for best PlayStation 3 graphics. It has a ton of cool scenes. Like, you have some scenes that are action-packed. You have an incredible number of really challenging moral decisions. Like, you know, how far do you go in revenge? And, of course, the tagline of the game is, what would you do for someone you love? Or how much would you do for someone you love? And that question comes up a lot in the game. And it's really cool because it has the most incredible amount of replay value of any game that I have. You know, you can play through literally every mission in at least 3 different ways. Okay? And even though there are only 2 endings, like either this one character will live or he will die, you probably have at least a dozen little sub-endings. So for example, there are 4 main characters that you play as, and that works out a lot better than it sounds. Like, it all ties together really well. But if one character dies, the game just keeps going without that character. So it's like, by the end, you could have only 1 character. If they all die, you lose. But you could have 1 character, 2 characters, 3 characters, or 4 of the main characters alive. And actually, in the very last battle, one of the main characters has to die, at least one. But overall, the plot is amazing. It's like, if you like moral decision-making in games, like Fallout 3, but you want something that seems real, and is very realistic, it's very much a realist game. It's a great game for someone like me who likes a good plot. The only people who I'd say maybe shouldn't buy this one are people who just play first-person shooters. because it's not that action-packed. It has scenes where it's really action-packed, but overall the game has some slow scenes too, which works fine if you're into mysteries. But, yeah, like, it's not right for everyone. Let's just put it that way. It's right for about 90% of people. I would say 90% of people buy this. Other 10% at least give it a shot. At least rent. The only people who I can imagine not liking Heavy Rain are people who are just in video games for action and don't like plot. You know? If you're not sure, at least give it a rent. You'll probably like it. Try it out. And then Infamous. Infamous is another game of moral decision making. The plot's not as deep though. It's basically it's a superhero game. Although it can also be an anti-hero game. You can either play as a good moral character, a really good character, a medium character, a bad character, or like a purely evil character. And it's pretty good in that. You know, people treat you differently depending on how you act. You can switch basically whenever you want by just killing a lot of random people or saving a lot of random people. Plot's pretty good, not amazing. The gameplay is really fun though. It's all electricity based, but there are a lot of creative things they come up with when it comes to electricity. Missions can be a little repetitive. I'd say it's a buy for most people, unless if you're not interested in superheroes at all, at least give it a rent. It might be a game that you really like. If you like superheroes, definitely buy it. And those are the only new games I have since my last video. Or at least those are the only ones I found. I do want to give a shout out though to two of my favorite games. Metal Gear Solid 4, which I already said barely beats out Uncharted 2 to be my favorite PlayStation 3 game. Why am I giving it another shout out? Well, because it really hasn't sold enough, you know? Yeah, it is the highest selling PlayStation 3 game ever made. But at the same time, that means it sold about 5 million, which is a ton. But that's still about half of what Halo 3 sold, you know? And Halo 3 is not twice as good as this game. Halo 3 is good, I like it. But it's not twice as good as Metal Gear Solid. So if you're a PS3 owner and you don't have Metal Gear Solid 4, at least rent it, check it out. It's a cheap game now, it's like 20 bucks. Definitely check it out. It's a really, really, really good game. I can't stress that enough. And finally, Valkyria Chronicles. Like I said before, this game is really good, RPG, role-playing game. Same kind of style as Final Fantasy, although like a European version. Basically, it takes the plot of like World War II, but it changes it enough to make it fun and not seem stale. Really cool game. It does have kind of an animated style, but if that's your only problem with the game, don't let that hold you back from buying it. At least give it a rent though, even if you are a little skeptical. It's a really fun game. The gameplay is really good, really deep. The story's good. Like I said, it's World War II, but with enough changes that it doesn't feel overused. And for Valkyria Chronicles, when you buy it, buy it new. Alright? Because the sales of this game are way too low. I don't think it ever broke 500,000 total sales. Which is a shame, because it's a game that has like a 9 out of 10 rating on average. Anyway, that's about all I've got to say. I know this is a long video, but, you know, those are a lot of good games, right? I'll make another video sometime that'll be about my downloaded games, and that's when we'll get into some games that I say to avoid, you know? Until then, peace out. Check out my Fox News commentary. Please comment. I often reply to comments. Subscribe, favorite, friend, whatever you like to do. I'll see you again soon, and I'll make another video like this probably in about a year.